Imagine taking out like a third mortgage on your house.
Right. Just completely leveraging yourself.
Yeah, and you sell your reliable daily commuter, you empty out your retirement accounts, and it's all to buy this flashy, neon-colored sports car.
Which, looks great on Instagram.
Exactly. But then as you're driving it off the lot, you realize the transmission is completely blown, the tires are bald, and you literally don't have a single dollar left to pay for gas.
It's just the ultimate financial and really structural panic move. You've essentially traded long-term stability for this total illusion of immediate luxury.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly what the Minnesota Timberwolves just did to their entire franchise. So welcome to another deep dive. Today we are looking at a trade that has, completely shifted the tectonic plates of the league.
It really has. The immediate reaction across the basketball landscape has just been deafening.
Oh, absolutely. And we need to talk about the fallout today because, in case you've been living under a rock, Tim Connolly and the Timberwolves front office just went entirely all in. They traded for Charlotte Hornets star LaMelo Ball alongside Josh Green.
And it is a seismic shift in how the Western Conference is going to play out. It changes everything.
It does. And you look at the national media right now, and they are just completely swept up in the glitz of it all.
Oh, the hype is out of control.
Right. I've seen the viral clips. You've seen the social media graphics. Everyone is screaming about the 2020 draft reunited.
Yeah.
Because, Anthony Edwards and LaMelo went 1-3 in that draft.
Yeah, the narrative just writes itself for the media.
Totally. They're all cheering that Anthony Edwards finally has this flashy point guard to run the fast break with. They're calling it the most entertaining backcourt in basketball.
Which, sure, it has that shiny blockbuster appeal. It looks fantastic on a billboard or a video game cover.
But, and this is why we do these deep dives, when you actually read through the analysis, look at the cap sheets, and study the historical precedents that we're going to unpack today, it cuts right through all of that hype.
It really does. The math just doesn't lie.
No, it doesn't. The underlying reality of this trade is a blistering, no-holds-barred disaster. We are looking at a move that is a desperate, short-sighted gamble.
Yeah, it's a massive risk.
To put it bluntly, this trade is a ticking time bomb for Minnesota's championship window.
And the goal today is to really cut through that noise for the casual NBA fan who, just sees the highlight reels.
Yeah.
We need to look under the hood of that broken sports car you mentioned.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we even break down LaMelo Ball, the player, we have to talk about the sheer gravity of what the Timberwolves gave up to get him.
Because that sets the stakes for this entire grand experiment.
Exactly. They completely emptied the chamber. First, let's just talk about the human element on the floor. They sent Naz Reid to Charlotte.
And that departure, honestly, it cannot be overstated. Naz Reid was the reigning heart and soul of the Timberwolves bench.
He really was.
He was the sixth man of the year, the guy who kept their offense afloat when the starters rested, and arguably the most beloved player in that locker room.
For sure.
Losing him is a massive, massive blow
Yeah.
to their internal chemistry and just their physical identity on the court.
But as much as losing Naz hurts the fans today, the draft capital they sent out should make them feel physically sick about tomorrow. Let me just read off this haul because it is staggering.
Brace yourself.
Seriously, Minnesota gave up a 2033 unprotected first-round pick.
Ouch.
They gave up 3 first-round pick swaps in 2028, 2029, and 2030, plus 3 second-round picks just to, sweeten the pot.
It's unbelievable.
They essentially handed over the deed to their franchise for the next decade.
It is a complete mortgage of the future. They're stripping away every last ounce of flexibility they had left.
But wait, let me push back here a little bit.
Sure.
Anthony Edwards is only 22 years old. By the time that 2033 pick even conveys, Ant is still basically in his prime, right?
Well, hypothetically, yes.
So isn't the entire point of the NBA to maximize your superstar's window right now? Why should a fan listening to this care about a draft pick who is literally sitting in a middle school algebra class right now if trading that pick gets them a player who might help them win a ring next year?
It's a fair question, and that is the temptation every front office faces. But it fundamentally misunderstands the mechanics of how you build and sustain a winner in this league.
How so?
Well, those district picks aren't just future players. They are the actual currency of the league. There is a golden rule of NBA team building mentioned in the source material. You only give up that kind of unprecedented draft capital for a very specific type of asset.
Right, like a guaranteed superstar.
Exactly. 3 years of swaps and an unprotected pick at the very end of the decade. You do that for a top-tier, two-way superstar who virtually guarantees you multiple finals appearances just by stepping on the court.
Okay, so you're talking about, like, the Kevin Durant to Phoenix trade, or even going way back to the Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett trade to the Nets. Moves where you are getting literal Hall of Fame equity.
Right. And historically, even those trades often end in disaster.
Yeah, that Nets trade was brutal.
But you certainly do not empty the chamber for a guard who doesn't play defense and honestly treats shot selection like a random number generator.
Wow, random number generator. That's harsh but accurate.
And think about what a pick swap actually does. It's really insidious.
Because you still technically get a pick, right?
Exactly. You still get a pick in those years, so fans think, oh, it's not a big deal. But a swap means you are constantly drafting at the back of the line
Yeah.
while someone else reaps all the rewards of your bad season.
Right.
It silently drains your ability to inject cheap, high-end talent into your roster for half a decade.
And because Minnesota had already traded away a massive chunk of their future for Rudy Gobert, they are officially out of bullets.
Completely empty.
If this LaMelo experiment fails, they have absolutely zero currency left. They can't make another trade to fix it. They can't attach a pick to dump a bad contract. They are entirely, completely trapped in the bed they just made.
Which means the player they pushed all their chips in for better be the safest bet on the board. The margin for error is effectively zero.
Right. Missing 40 games a season is a disaster in a vacuum, but it becomes a franchise-ending catastrophe when you realize they gave up their entire safety net for him.
Which is terrifying.
And that brings us to the flashing red lights surrounding LaMelo Ball's health. The Minnesota front office seems to be aggressively convincing themselves that they're getting the LaMelo Ball who pushed through and played 72 games last season.
Yeah, they are looking at a contract year performance and projecting it as the new normal.
Which is dangerous.
Very. Because when you look at his complete medical chart over the last 3 years, it is an absolute nightmare.
The numbers are terrifying. Let me break this down for you. Before this past season, from 2022 to 2025, LaMelo played a grand total of only 105 games.
Across 3 seasons.
Yes, across 3 entire seasons. We are talking about an average of roughly 35 games a year.
That's less than half a season.
Right. His ankles have been this persistent, recurring, chronic issue for almost his entire professional career.
What's fascinating here is how the physical risk mathematically compounds the asset risk we just talked about.
Oh, explain that.
Well, ankle injuries for a point guard whose entire game relies on lateral quickness, stop and start motion, and just erratic movement, those aren't like a broken wrist that heals and you just move on.
Right, it's not a freak accident.
Exactly. They are structural vulnerabilities.
Imagine being a fan who just watched your front office trade away the next 7 years of franchise assets. You are fired up, you buy the jersey, and then your team's supposedly second-best player is sitting on the bench in street clothes for half the season.
That's a gut punch.
Are the Wolves just praying that last year's health was a permanent fix? Or are they ignoring the reality that players with chronic lower body issues rarely get healthier as they age into their late 20s?
And that is the multi-million-dollar question. If those ankle issues flare up again, the franchise is completely paralyzed.
Because of the money.
Right. You cannot afford to have a player taking up that massive percentage of your salary cap sitting next to the coaching staff in a designer outfit. You literally just mortgaged your next 7 years for a spectator.
Wow, and that perfectly bridges us to the next, arguably most devastating layer of this trade. Because missing games is awful, but paying $40 million for a player to miss games triggers a completely different set of catastrophic NBA rules.
The rules that casual fans might not fully realize yet.
Let's look at the financial straitjacket this puts Minnesota in. The numbers here are just astronomical.
They really are. LaMelo currently has 3 years left on his 5-year maximum rookie extension.
Which is what, over $40 million annually?
Yep, over $40 million a year.
Yeah.
And it gets much heavier. On July 6th, he actually becomes eligible for a 2-year, $119 million extension.
Good grief. And just to legally make the math work to bring that massive salary in, the Timberwolves had to aggregate salaries in the trade.
Which is where the trap snaps shut.
Exactly. By doing so, they crossed a threshold in the new collective bargaining agreement that triggers something called a second apron hard cap for the 2026-27 season. So, what does this all mean?
That's the big question.
For the casual fan trying to make sense of this financial jargon, hitting the second apron isn't just a luxury tax where your billionaire owner simply writes a bigger check to the league. Right?
No, not anymore.
It's like the NBA putting a Denver boot on your car. You can sit in it, the leather looks nice, you can turn on the radio, but you physically cannot move the vehicle.
That is the perfect analogy. The new CBA was specifically designed by the league to ruthlessly punish teams that try to hoard 3 maximum salary players.
They hate it.
They do. The league wants parity, and they're using the rule book to force it.
Mhm.
Look at Minnesota's cap sheet right now. You have Anthony Edwards making supermax money. You have Rudy Gobert, who is incredibly expensive. You have Jaden McDaniels, who is also getting paid handsomely. And now you drop LaMelo's $40+ million boulder right into the middle of that lake.
So they crossed the second apron threshold, which means their roster is effectively frozen in amber. How on earth are they supposed to fill out a bench?
Well, they can't. Not with quality players, anyway. The penalties are brutal. First, you lose your taxpayer mid-level exception.
And that's usually the primary tool contending teams use to sign veteran role players who outplay the minimum.
Exactly. It's gone. Second, you completely lose the ability to aggregate salaries in future trades.
So meaning like you can't package 2 smaller $3 million contracts together to trade for one $6 million player.
Gone. You can't do it.
Mm.
And third, you physically cannot take back a single dollar more in a trade than you send out.
That is suffocating. And we are seeing the real-world roster destruction happening right before our eyes. They already had to dump Julius Randle to the Brooklyn Nets just to maneuver financially to make this happen. Then they lose Naz Reid to Charlotte in this deal. I'm looking at their projected depth chart right now, who is actually coming off the bench for this team.
It's pretty grim.
They traded their depth for a starter, but they are literally not allowed to replace the depth they traded away.
That's the fatal flaw. Financially, they are locked into a top-heavy roster with 0 depth. The depth and size that made Minnesota a legitimate, terrifying contender in the West in the first place has been entirely stripped away.
It's all gone.
You just don't win a grueling 82-game season and a 2-month playoff run with 4 guys and a bunch of minimum contract players you pulled off the scrap heap.
Okay, let's play make-believe for a minute.
Right.
Let's assume the draft picks don't matter. Let's assume LaMelo stays perfectly healthy. Let's assume they somehow manage to survive with a bench made up of guys playing for the league minimum.
That's a lot of assuming.
It is. But even if we do all that, we still have to look at the actual hardwood. What happens when the ball is tipped? Because the on-court fit between LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards is completely baffling.
To understand why they did this, we really have to look at the psychology of the front office. Minnesota watched Anthony Edwards face constant, agonizing double teams in the playoffs.
Wow, it was brutal to watch.
Opposing defenses were throwing the kitchen sink at him just to get the ball out of his hands.
So they decided, understandably, that they needed a secondary playmaker at all costs. Someone to take the pressure off of Ant.
Which, makes sense on paper.
Right. The intention makes sense. You want someone else who can create a shot so the defense can't just swarm your superstar. But here's where it gets really interesting, because the reality of the fit is completely at odds with what they actually need.
Completely at odds.
You don't solve a double team problem by bringing in a high-usage player who doesn't guard anybody and needs the ball in his hands to be effective.
The stylistic clash here is glaring. We need to remember how Minnesota built their identity. They built a team specifically designed to beat the Denver Nuggets.
Big, physical, tough.
Yes, they built a massive, defensively suffocating, structured team. But when they ran into different styles in the playoffs, they kind of panicked.
They definitely panicked.
Instead of trusting the foundation that brought them success, they abandoned their core identity. LaMelo Ball is not a traditional, steady floor general who is going to patiently set up the offense, run pick and roll with Gobert, and feed Anthony Edwards in his sweet spots.
Far from it. You are pairing a downhill, physical, Jordan-esque attacker like Anthony Edwards with a point guard who is going to take the ball completely out of his hands.
Yep.
He's going to dribble around the perimeter and launch a 30-foot, off-balance, step-back three-pointer with 18 seconds still left on the shot clock. It goes back to that phrase you used earlier, treating shot selection like a random number generator.
And think about the coaching dynamic. Coach Chris Finch runs a structured, methodical system. He relies on defensive accountability and offensive execution.
He's a very disciplined coach.
Trying to reel in LaMelo's erratic wildcard play style is going to be a nightmare for a coaching staff that demands discipline.
He is going to lose his mind on the sideline. I mean, you have a defensive identity, and suddenly you inject a player who routinely loses his man off the ball, takes wild gambles in passing lanes, and actively frustrates the flow of a structured offense. It just feels so counterproductive.
This raises an important question. is a sheer panic move to relieve pressure on your star,
Yeah.
worth sacrificing your entire team identity.
I would argue no.
They solved one problem, they got another guy who can dribble, but they created a massive new one. They fundamentally altered the DNA of a team that was already good enough to contend.
It's the classic mistake of over-tinkering. You had a solid Swiss watch, it kept great time, but you wanted it to also play music, so you jammed a Bluetooth speaker inside it, and now the gears are broken.
That's exactly what this is.
This isn't just a questionable fit. This is a trade that is going to actively explode in their face.
Which brings us back to the ultimate conclusion we started with. In 3 years, we will likely look back at this exact moment as the specific transaction that slammed the Timberwolves championship window permanently shut.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath and recap what we've covered today, because there is a massive amount of information to digest here.
That's a lot to take in.
It really is. For the listener trying to process this nuke that just dropped on the NBA, the national media might be hyping up the flashy new backcourt, but the underlying reality is grim.
Very grim.
We are looking at an exorbitant, franchise-altering cost of future draft assets and swaps that leaves the team completely devoid of trade currency.
We're also looking at terrifying medical red flags with LaMelo's chronic ankle issues, effectively removing any margin for error the team had left.
Add to that the financial straitjacket.
Right.
By triggering the second apron, the league has essentially put a Denver boot on Minnesota's roster, completely stripping the team of its crucial bench depth and flexibility.
Yep.
And finally, you have a clunky, deeply frustrating on-court fit that abandons the team's defensive identity and is going to drive the coaching staff crazy.
It's just a perfect storm of roster-building risks. You've gambled your future, your finances, your health, and your identity, all on one spin of the roulette wheel.
It's wild.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Let's fast forward a bit. Let's say the worst-case scenario happens.
Which, based on everything we've talked about, is highly plausible.
Exactly. If this grand roster experiment fails, if LaMelo's ankles don't hold up, or the on-court chemistry is a disaster and the Wolves are completely capped out with literally no draft picks left to improve the team around their star.
Yeah.
How long will it be before Anthony Edwards looks around, realizes the front office trapped him in a sinking ship, decides he's had enough, and demands a trade out of Minnesota?
Man, when the smoke finally clears from this offseason explosion, that might just be the most devastating casualty of them all. Anthony Edwards in another uniform because his front office panicked. Thank you for listening. Please comment, like, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, Spotify, please leave 5-star review. It will help the channel grow. Until next time, please check our previous episodes.